Now, many of you have probably, by now, out here in the wilds of the internet, have seen a diagram similar to this, where it shows the political spectrum. It's got the right wing over here on this end, and it's got the left wing over here, and or whatever on either side. And so you'll have like, oh, but socialism's over here, and Antifa, and that fascism and right wing and whatever it is over here on this end. And that's why our society is so polarized, and that you have the parties are anywhere in between. It seems like every single time you see the diagram, they've aligned themselves in a little bit different way as far as their distance from the middle, their distance from each end. But what I'd like to say right now is simply that that is a misrepresentation of the actual reality of how politics have kind of assembled themselves. What we're actually dealing with is if you took this and kind of bent it in so that it came, so those two ends came back around together, what you would have is something that looks a little bit more like that. So here in the middle, that's the center of the line, and then this is at each end, right? So you have still right wing, left wing is here at the points where tyranny and bullying and aggressive mob-based tactics, racial polarization, just violence, destruction, mob rule, so forth, they're down here. That's why it's so common for Antifa to use tactics similar to what they accuse the fascists of using, whether that's the iconic image of the anarchist throwing the bomb or the grenade or the Molotov cocktail, right? The reason that it's so common to see those kind of tactics used by both sides is because politically they actually agree far more than they're willing to admit. There's so many internet kind of parodies out there of this kind of phenomena where they'll say that like BLM is arguing that white people are superior in society, and KKK is like, yeah, we've been on that for decades. Like, it's interesting that literally they'll have the same rhetorical lines. The only difference is their perspective. The difference is what they're using those arguments to suggest, or what they're drawing the conclusion from with those ideas. So what actually happened is, if we were to use a real or a more accurate political spectrum, is that there's a line cut from here to here, and that onto this side you have freedom, democracy, representation. Over here you have tyranny, monarchy, oppressive mob rule. You have all those things, and that anywhere in between, see where this arc lines up, it kind of shows you where you are in between those two perspectives of, do you want tyranny or do you want freedom? And whereas direct democracy is also tending to, like, it tends to mob rule and things, so we have a representative democracy. The reason why you have in society that people are so against the very structures, the very the designs of our system, like the Electoral College, against representative democracy, against the separation of the three branches of government, against the bicameral Congress, against the reason why you see so many of these things that are against, like in modern age, that people tend to be against those things, is simply because they're trying to, what it's happening is those are the anchors of democracy that hold. If you imagine that our political discourse is like a pendulum that swings back and forth, and so you have the left side, the right side, they're pulling back and forth, but they're bracketed up here in those systems, the separations of powers, checks and balances, so forth. Well, you break that down so that literally, if you imagine that there's a bracket that holds it together, you demolish that bracket. What happens is literally gravity, right? I mean, physical principles in effect, it brings it down, right? Breaks it. And then what happens is, as much as, like, before it had been swinging back and forth, so that, like, the conservatives will get power for a little while, they'll pull it this way, but then, like, it swings back the other way, and it ends up that the liberals get a little bit more power for a little while, and then it ends up swinging back towards the middle, and so you have this constant, steady change back and forth between the liberal conservatives. Well, you break that, that same effect is going to be occurring, right? They're going to pull back and forth between these two things, but instead of it being naturally swinging back towards moderation with a little bit of overstep, back towards moderation with a little bit of overstep, the actual motions will be from tyranny to a little bit of conservatism, or conservative ideals, back towards tyranny, and then a little bit of overstep towards liberal, and then a little, like, and so our system is currently in the realm of where we're swinging like this, because we still have those systems intact, the Electoral College, these things. If those things break down, whereas primarily we're in a position of that most people are moderate, and that the two sides kind of pull back and forth to try and convince the moderates towards their side, it'll be, you have a tyrannical, overreaching, oppressive government, which then the people on both sides are trying to pull back and forth towards directing that tyranny in their favor. And obviously, there's nothing but destruction and painful circumstances and consequences from that. So, just something to think about in regards to this idea of a political spectrum. What we want is a system anchored in democracy, in democratic systems, that helps moderation win rather than polarity, and that fosters kind of bicameral conversation of issues rather than just trying to direct the powers of tyranny in your direction or against those who disagree with you.